Hi guys, and welcome to my last video for Com 322. I hope you are as proud as I am of yourself. You have almost made it through a very difficult 5-week semester. As you know, summer sessions are crazy, and so many of you have done so much good work and so much good thinking. And so I hope that come Friday at 8 p.m. you do a lot to celebrate yourself. In this last video, I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to give you some information about the final exam. I'm going to review for that final exam, and I'm also going to go over quizzes 7 and 8, which is some of the sports stuff and some of the food stuff. So yeah, sit back and enjoy and learn a lot in these final days. All right, so the final exam is given on Friday, July 21st. That is the actual official university final exam day. And so that is the day that I will be giving the final. It will be open from 8 a.m. and it will run until 8 p.m. You should allow for 100 minutes, and there is no backtracking. So on the quizzes, I allow you to toggle back and forth between questions. On this test, you will answer them as they come. And you should be more than ready to do that. You are content experts now, so I know that you will be ready to do that. All right, so for some housekeeping stuff and some reminders, make sure you're studying the sample quiz answers that are posted on the left-hand side of the Blackboard site. The quizzes that you've taken in this half of the semester are also available if you wanted to go through them again, and you can also see my comments there. You should definitely remember that I posted some sample answers for test 1, so you should be taking a look at that. And you should be going through the study guide and making sure that you can define each concept and also apply, which means you can talk about a specific example, or if a friend or peer gave you an example, you could be able to talk about that example using the content material. Also, don't forget to look at and do the Blackboard discussion board, where I'm asking you to post sample test questions. So we tend to remember about 90% of the material that we teach, which is why pedagogically, which is a fancy word for teaching, I'm asking you to create some exam questions there for quiz credit, because I'm forcing you to interact with the material in a way that makes you teach something. And so you have to post 3 questions there. The instructions are on the discussion board. You have to do that by today, Wednesday at 5 o'clock, in order to receive your 10 points for quiz 10. And if you're a little bit off on the material, then I'll fix it there, but make sure that you're taking a look at the questions that your peers have created. That's a great study tool for you. And as always, whenever you're talking about material, you need to make sure you're rooting it in class material. Don't forget about your infographic, which is another big task that you have by Friday at 8, and that is already available for you to turn in if you're done with it at the Turn In tab on the left-hand side of Blackboard. Also, your grades will be done ASAP. By the time you take the final on Friday, your grades will be up to date. They'll probably be up to date by the end of today, but they'll definitely be up to date by Friday morning, so you'll know exactly where you stand. And I promise you that I will grade the exams as fast as humanly possible. I hope that you know that I have tried to keep up on the grading all semester. I typically turn your quizzes around the same day that you take them, so I'm really committed to a fast turnaround, and I want them done as fast as you do. All right, let's talk about review for the quizzes 7 and 8. Okay, so I'm not posting sample answers. I'm just going to talk about them in depth here. One of your questions about Serena Williams was, how does Black excellence function in her life? And a lot of you had really good answers, but many of you really missed the boat here. So Black excellence, even though I understand that that's a confusing name, is not a good thing, guys. Black excellence is kind of this unfair standard that society, not necessarily individuals, not you and me, but society in general kind of holds people of color too. So for example, for Serena Williams, she's expected not to swagger when she wins. She's expected to be humble. She's expected to keep her temper at all times. And if she doesn't, she is kind of punished more than white athletes when they do that. And in addition, Black excellence also kind of functions that she's the most decorated female tennis player, and maybe tennis player ever. She's the most successful female athlete, and certainly, the most successful female tennis player. And she still, while she has a lot of endorsement deals, she still doesn't have as many endorsement deals as, say, white women who aren't as successful as her. And so that's an example of how people of color tend to have to be bigger, better, faster, more successful than their white counterparts in order to get the same, or not even the same, worse treatment. And I also want you to think more about the standard for white versus black bodies and also male versus female bodies, right? And that's some of the things that I was asking you to do on the quiz. So when a white male tennis player loses his mind on the court, how is that treated by the press versus when Serena Williams does it? For God's sake, they're making a movie out of McEnroe and the controversy and the rivalry between John McEnroe and Bjorn Borg and how much they used to lose it on the court, right? They're making a movie. They're glorifying it so much. And Serena Williams loses her temper, right? And it's like national news in a bad way. And also the way black and white is featured. And we obviously used Tiger Woods and Serena Williams as an example for that. And so I want you to think more about the differences and how people are treated in the media. And I'm always asking you about the media treatment, right? Like, we don't know Serena Williams personally. So while I think that she's probably a really strong and proud black woman, we don't know that. We don't know Serena. All we know is how she's portrayed in the media. And so that's what I want you to talk about. Also, in terms of food, I want you to make sure that you're talking about appropriation, not appreciation. So a lot of you would say the right answer. Appropriation is when we take something from another culture and use it for ourselves. But then you would say like, oh, and I do this when I have this like yummy comfort food that makes me feel good. That's more appreciation. Appropriation is when you take something from a culture and you exploit it and you try to get cultural cachet and you really care more about the thing, the product, than you do the cultural understanding. And the example that I gave for that obviously was the General Tso's chicken, but also a lot of the other ethnic food mentioned in the reading. And white people tend to do that, right? Like, we tend to be experts on cultural cuisine, and we're really not experts, but we're trying to get that cultural cachet, and that ties back to the Thomas Frank reading. Also, the big business stuff. There's a really interesting discussion going on the discussion board, and I loved it. And I appreciate everybody who's chiming in there about whether or not this is a consumer thing or a business thing. And it's probably a little bit of both. And I love that you guys have helped me kind of think through that a little bit more. But certainly consumers want cheap and fast food, which is a weird standard, right? We don't have that standard for anything else. I don't walk to a car lot and say, like, give me your cheapest and your, like, most dangerous car. But, but we do that with food. And I think that's probably because of consumers, but it's also because businesses have kind of told us that that's what we should demand, right? And that's, of course, because they make a lot of money off of it. And so this idea that food is big business has to do with kind of capitalism and the way products are circulated in society. All right, the exam, it is 20 multiple choice, 2 points each. That should make people happy. They're not worth as much as they were on the midterm. And there's 10 short answers, should also make you happy because you guys did really well on that on the exam number 1, 5 points each. And then there's 1 essay, just like the last time. So you should definitely be able to define and give examples of this, right? So third wave feminism, you should be able to talk about the history and how different it is from like the second wave. Obviously, for our purposes, third wave feminism is more rooted in media. It's more rooted in individual choice, which is empowering, but it's also something that media and businesses can co-opt, right? So now we see people using feminism to sell us stuff, which is really interesting. Black excellence, just like I talked about a couple minutes ago, you want to make sure that you're understanding that that's in general kind of a negative thing because it's a societal expectation that is really difficult for people of color to meet. Cycle of food, I kind of put this on everybody's quizzes, but if you do not talk about wages, the wages of the workers being low, you will not get full credit when you talk about the cycle. So the cycle, a big part of it is that people do not make very much money right now in this system that is predicated upon cheap and fast food. And so when wages are low, all we can afford then is kind of cheap and fast food. And so it's a real dangerous cycle. The girl power television, you should definitely be able to give other examples. I mean, the article talked about 3 Nickelodeon shows, but then in the Prezi, I think I talked about That's So Raven, and I'm sure you guys have tons of others. So make sure that you understand the components of girl power, which is that to a degree, boys are rejected, that the girl is complicated, that she is seen as real and she's contradictory. Make sure you can talk about those tenets of the girl power television and be able to apply them to other television shows. And I definitely expect that you're able to talk about the tenets of hypermasculinity. So hypermasculinity is kind of this exaggerated performance of masculinity, and our reading says that it's predicated upon 3 different things. 1 is kind of this really buff, strong body. 2 is this callous attitude toward women and sex. And 3, that men are expected to engage in kind of dangerous and risk-taking behavior. And so I would always expect that you're able to take those 3 tenets and apply it to a text. Or if I said, can you give me an example of a hyper-masculine character, that you would be able to talk through that and give me an example. All right, in the essay, I want to make sure that you're being very attentive to what I'm asking you. And so this could be something really good for you to work through, like the structure of your essay, and try to maybe have an outline going into the exam so you make sure that you're giving me enough detail. Last time on the exam, you didn't necessarily give me enough textual examples and you weren't exactly specific to the material. And what I'm really looking for is that you're able to be like, okay, here's my argument. Here's some class material, and I'm going to talk about it at length so you know that I understand it. And here is some textual examples from the text that you have in this essay question that I'm going to parse out and say, here's one example, here's a second example. Because really what I'm missing from you is kind of that connection. And remember, the university requirement for this Tier 2 class is that I can take you from knowledge to judgment, right? So it's not just enough to know the class material, to know a definition of hypermasculinity. You have to be able to use that definition in order to make a judgment about a text. And so that's really what I'm looking for on the final exam. I know you're going to do wonderful. I cannot wait to read all of your answers. And I've really enjoyed all of your hard work this semester. So thanks a lot and have a fantastic rest of your summer.